we go. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome.
All right.
We're here. We're here in space. We're
Engage.
Yeah. What do we do on the show? We're the Motion Design Hotline. We nominally solve people's problems. People hanging out in the chat. Oh, Joe Jacks, hello. Man, people are hanging out with us. Today,
Hello, people.
we're gonna be talking about some maybe lesser done effects from the space fights series of film and television, which both of us have obviously watched a lot.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
we can
Clearly know a lot about it. So.
yeah, we can speak to a lot of the deep cuts and the lore and those types of things. Regular Todd Vaziri over here. Who, if you don't follow Todd Vaziri on Twitter, I'm going to really recommend that you do.
Yeah, you should.
He has a lot of interesting insights. We'll have insights, certainly, but the quality level may be lower. We'll find out.
Evan, I have a question for you. Is
Okay.
the Behance chat, does that need to be enabled or something?
Oh.
It looks like it's not there.
Goodness me. I like when
And
you
I'm
have
sure
to...
those people will have things to say.
I got some thoughts they want to share with us. Well, I keep going to turn chat on off. There we go. Oh. Just a...
There it goes. Engage chat.
Yeah. Boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. This is the great thing about Behance. You have to click on the word, not the toggle button. You got to click the word. This is not up to LCAR's standards for the various beeps and boops out there. Okay, so if you have any questions about what you see, let us know in the chat. We'll try to help you out.
Well, After Effects related questions. If you have questions about generally what you see, we may or may not be able to help you with that.
Sure. If you have questions about what we're doing on this show, we can probably answer those. If you have broader questions,
we'll try to answer those too. They just may be less accurate.
We'll do our best.
Yeah.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, as Evan said, nominally, and
yeah.
I don't know if you gave this part. We do talk about After Effects and generally motion design related questions, problems, whatever you want to know about. So if you have things that you want us to know, or you want to know,
yeah.
I mean, if you want us to know things, that's good too.
Yeah.
Ask us and we'll do them. That's literally what this show is. And you can, you can type things into the chat. Please do that. But sending us real questions is the better way.
Yeah.
Got a form right there. Yeah.
We got a form. You can fill it out. You can send us links to things. If you've got a project you're stuck on, send us that. We'll try to help you out with it. Those are the best. When people can send us half-completed things for us to tinker with. Those are good.
And of course, since I don't think we said this, you can, of course, go to motiondesignhotline.com and find the same form. You can find cool hats. You can find old shows, project files. The list is practically endless. Practically.
And growing every day.
Yeah.
So I guess we should probably start at the beginning, like all of these great great journeys through the cosmos, these walks among the celestial bodies. Let's begin with Evan's screen over here. And so I'll just press play and you let me know if you recognize any of this stuff. It's space fights. We're talking space fights today. And
that's a neat idea, but I'm not sure I've seen this before.
No, okay. Well, if you're not familiar, a lot of old-timey serials used to start with a kind of pre-roll at the beginning of them, which is pretty helpful, especially when you want to, I want to say, communicate a lot of plot-related things that you don't bother to put in the script. So that's pretty helpful.
Yeah.
The Emperor is back somehow. And what's really great about this is if you watch for long enough, eventually the camera will turn away from these words, reading, gross, and get into the action, but will believe that those words were floating off in space as we pan down to a planet of some kind.
Very nice.
Yeah. This image courtesy of the American NASA. So thank you.
You're
NASA.
welcome. My tax dollars paid for you to make that.
Exactly, which is pretty nice. This is apparently a real planet. You can look at it if you look up. And that's right, it is no moon. That's an exoplanet. Clean my glasses. So how do we do this type of thing, Kyle? What are we doing? What are these component parts? Back in the day,
I still don't know how you ever thought of this concept. That's very original.
And if people are reading the words that I've put in here, don't think about it too much. So this is, quite frankly, a 2-dimensional layer and then a big 3-dimensional layer that is just tilting off into space. There are nigh infinite ways to kind of piece this stuff together, right? We've got just basically a text layer here. I went and found, a very, I think, on-brand font is what we were looking at for this. Just go into our character palette and we're putting a stroke around it with no fill. Perfect. We got kind of an orangey yellow. Not much to it. And then to make growing and shrinking of this thing a little bit easier, we can just attach that to a null, a different null, this one probably, that is the thing doing the shrinking. That's going to allow you to push your stuff around and get it figured out a little bit better, and just let this null do the shrinky part for you, right? And within that, here's the thing that really vexed me a lot. Just for a peek behind the curtain, one of the first things that I ever did in After Effects as a young child, what do they call them? Patty cakes. As a young patty cake, Evan was making his fan films for Space Fights, and this part really baked my potato, trying to get this to scale correctly. So this is when you really want to come in here and mess with the value graph on scale so that you can push things down and flatten them out. So like a regular eased thing comes in looking a little bit like this, and it like hangs in front of your face too long. But if you want things to start dramatically, you want to point this first one down, so it's moving off of the jump, but then it has to hang out in what we're going to call let's call it the reading zone for here, just where I spent most of my childhood, in the reading zone. And you need it to go from an illegible space here into a legible space and hang out long enough so that we can actually enjoy it. And so that's why it takes this long. And if you simplify this type of thing, it's going to make timing them up quite a lot easier. So hopefully that's good news you can use in here. This big old block of text is just in a nice, long, thin composition here, which was before any of this was written. I just put a grid back here, right? It is really useful to put something that you can get a feel for how quickly it's going as you're trying to figure out, well, how long is this going to be up? Are people going to be able to read it? Is that going to be difficult? That's going to be great. So coming to here, that will eventually get replaced with some words. This is a pretty good reworking of passages of Shakespeare, which I think is something pretty common to these various star programs, these various space shows. Love to do acting on acting in there. So there we go.
One thing that jumped out at me is the importance, and I find this a lot when I'm writing a variety of things, but the importance of writing something, choosing your wording based on the way it's going to look.
And like, so this, obviously we're using a very good official font for this. Scroll around the internet to find that. But yeah, so if we come into the paragraph stuff, so this is all kind of, what do we call this? Fully justified. And that's why you end up with it mushed over here at the edge. And really just anything like this is hyphenated, but if it's not hyphenated, it looks like that.
Right.
Like these things shift quite a lot. So you're probably going to be futzing with you can kind of see how, if we just bring that from 100 down to 96.2, it's starting to fill in a lot of that negative space, and very useful to get that figured out. But Kyle, here's the tricky part. How fast and how should it scroll by? right?
Yeah, slow enough to read, not too long that it takes forever, but also you got to find the right speed so it's not chuk 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 chuk
Yeah.
chuk, getting that choppy judder thing.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find really helpful is we're going to keep it on a linear motion away from us because it's just supposed to be scrolling and legible. The most readable stuff is at constant speed, and I'm animating on the anchor point. So the anchor point is making this thing scroll. So the actual kind of place it's referenced in the universe isn't going anywhere. And I'm using on this the loop out continue expression. So
Nice.
really the keyframes end here. This is where the keyframe has ended, but the continue means it keeps going. So I can throttle this up and down by pinching the keyframes together as opposed to having to like, "Oh, I'm going to dial it in. Where should it be when? Blah, blah, blah." Set two keyframes, loop out continue. That'll let it keep going in the direction you want. And then you're really just dialing in the rate at which you want it to go.
I
Um,
love continue. The biggest thing is you have to make sure that your second keyframe is not eased or doesn't
yeah,
ease to zero, because literally what the expression is doing is continuing the speed that it was coming into that last keyframe at. And so if you
yeah,
easy ease that, it's going to zero and thus it doesn't continue.
yeah. Here we can look at it on the graph, right? So we see this weird error on the graph, burp, burp, but this line sort of continues mathematically going at whatever the outgoing velocity of this would have been. So it's just continuing this forward on into the future. So if I ease this, this smashes into the ground, blorp,
Yep.
and then it does nothing.
Yep.
Or if I drag it down, because you can see that the continuance of it is slow. So that's why linear is nice and good. What else is useful to know about this? Okay, so the readable angle is really important on this thing. Um, I have stuck this to a null, and the null will help us with that angle as well. And that's because I had to stick other things to it. But
Hmm.
this makes it a little bit easier to say, like, all right, let's bring that up closer to the camera. Let's fade it
Yep.
down away from the camera a bit. Maybe we need to move it kind of horizontally, like up and down in the space. So it's really the angle and how high or low it is going to depend on where it appears to be vanishing to, and really trying to figure that out. So that is, and again, that's you're going to need to tweak that to taste, right? There's no one degree for which it helps, and a lot of it will probably be determined by your frame ratio. Honestly, the font is
Uh,
probably smaller than is strictly readable.
And a lot of times with something like this, and I used a very similar technique in the example I'll be showing in a few minutes. Using a null to sort of set your angle means that then your actual layer can just go in a straight line. You don't
Hmm.
have to like move, in this case,
Yeah.
you'd be trying to move upwards and away from us. And yeah, that's kind of an odd thing. You might get it right, but then if you want to tweak it at all, you're kind of futzing with your position keyframe. So much better to just connect it to a thing and then just go in
Yeah.
a straight line relative to that thing.
And because really, if the angle of this was flat, it would just be scrolling up the screen, basically. And this is just a marginally more exciting version of that. um, so how does it fade off into the darkness? That's the other part that requires some stylistic stuff. I have just put a big old solid out here on top of it and put a gradient ramp on that solid. So if I solo this, you can see this is the ramp with the solid on it. You could do this a lot of ways. I thought about what if I point a light down at this and then the light fades off? Or what if we're doing something with the draw distance of this thing? The simplest version of this is to just put a solid down over top of that thing, put a gradient on it, and then holding down shift to parent it will get it locked at the right angle and size. But this is being treated as a luma mat. So we're using this gradient as the luma mat, which basically means anywhere this is white, we're going to see it. Anywhere it's black, we're not going to see it. And that allows us to basically do a little fake roll off out here as this thing kind of goes and disappears into the darkness. The other thing that I did was I set this to multiply, and so it can actually cast like a bit of a shadow that's eating the text as it goes through. Just because like I was having a hard time actually getting the light to behave, right? Because you can put spotlights down, if you put multiple spotlights and you're starting to compound them and things.
Yep.
And we don't have as fine of control over the lighting. If we were to do this in, say, Cinema 4D, you can really customize where and how a light falls on something. That is the useful thing, that we are faking it. Now, here's the other part that gets squirrely. Why wouldn't we just use a linear wipe or a mask or something that is screen relative? Well, we're going to pitch the camera down while we can still see the text crawling away from us. So we need to still be able to see it and control it. And it's like it's being eaten by darkness, but the darkness is physically out there as a stop that we've put out in the world. So
almost like there's a dark like side of the text or something.
Yeah. A kind of encroaching darkness as we're going from kind of the lighted side, or the illuminated side, I think they would call it. And that's the useful bit of getting out there. And obviously we get to hide a lot of these things because it's a big old star field. Then we pan down. We're just going to pan the camera down. So there is a 3D camera out in the space. And then I'm just tilting it down. We're just using a little bit of X rotation and Y position. So it's going to pedestal down and tilt down to look at this planet. This could be anything. This could be like a ship cruising by. This could be maybe two ships pew, 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 doing that kind of thing, firing their phasers at each other, obviously.
Right.
Or
quantum torpedoes.
Yeah, it's important to give people some kind of context. For some reason, all of these programs begin this way. So we get down to where the action is at. Read a thing, set where the place is. Let's now go to the one planet that has only one environment, even though it's a planet and we're from a planet, but we have like a whole bunch of different biomes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all right. Well, let's not dissect it too much.
Yeah.
But the one thing that needs to look correct and good is the way the stars behave. So these are being projected using CC environment, and CC environment works best if you give it something equirectangular to look at. So here is a composition that's equally wide as it is tall. I didn't bother to go ahead and turn that into an actual equirectangular projection. That would have been difficult. Instead, I just went ahead and made a big old flat rectangle. Yeah. And
if we're not going to see the seams, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you never look at the polar regions, and you should never really be gazing at the polar regions anyway, then you're not going to see that awkward intersection of geometry that goes on when it pinches together. So really, we're here in the midline, so we just tilt down, and it behaves like a giant sphere that we are inside of. So it's a great way to have space. You get the feeling that we're looking in space. We can do real kind of camera stuff. Like if you're feeling very, very interesting, you could have this sort of rotate. Let's have it kind of like that.
Yeah.
Maybe we have it spin all the way around because the things are going to come from the other angle. And this is going to be totally, people will not have seen this in the 3 other movies that came before. This is totally different and weird, man. Whoa. Especially when you're binging them back to back to back. Then you really need some variety at the start of them. Anyway, so that's just something that you have total freedom to do whatever. And if you had 3D models, you can bring those in. Or if this was going to dovetail with something else, you've got the camera data in here from leaving this, and you would probably do like a placeholder of some kind for framing, and you just take your camera data, and now you can marry the two of them perfectly elsewhere. That's the sound of 2 pieces of footage kissing each other. Let's see. What else we got going on? I think that's it for my first one. Yeah. So, Kyle, we'll kick it over to you for kind of the continuation, but for continuity's sake, yours is going to be the episode before this one, which is it's going to make total sense when people watch
it. Exactly. But your thing still comes first. It came out first.
Yeah.
But then it happens after this one.
Yeah, chronologically.
But then there's, we could also do another episode that actually happens in between these to help clarify yours. All the things that you could have said but chose not to.
No, we're gonna do like 24 of those so that we can really stretch the inside of that
works.
Particular plot sandwich. Even if it really changes a lot of what I said in my thing and denies a lot of what you said in your thing.
No, it's fine. It was all there. We just chose not to say it.
Yeah. Hey, look, anytime they're not on screen, they're doing something.
Yep. Something. I will say there was a lot of talk about nulls in the chat over here on Behance. People seem to be enjoying these nulls, which is good.
And is that a robot or an android? What is a null?
You just used one. It's a
true.
null object. But you know what? It is kind of like something like that, because when you create them, they actually end up in your little solids folder here. So you'll have like a little collection of adjustment layers and solids and nulls. They're all kind of friends over there. That's good. I am a little confused. A couple times people have called out the name Luke, but that's not either of our names.
No, that's a different guy.
Yeah, but I'm not sure who that is.
I want to say he's the captain of the Entrepreneur is who he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could say that a Luke is flying this weird, like, sort of cross-wing ship here.
That's a W wing. I can see it right here. No, sorry, it's two V wings put together.
Yeah, two V wings. Yeah.
Obviously.
So here's the final export of what I created. I did compose a little music track for this too, so we'll set that high enough.
Original music, yes.
Yeah, I think that was pretty good. So those obviously the little promo for the social medias here. But we have this ship starts to fly off. It's going into warp, I think is what they call it.
Yep, warp speed. Warp space.
And so you have a little trail here, and if you kind of scrub through it, I also have a subtle camera movement here on this stars and planet. I used a very similar technique to what you did, except my planet is actually a sphere. Thank you very much. And then there's quite a bit going on here to get this ship doing its jump. Actually, again, a very similar technique to what you used. There's a null here. We'll see all this in a second. And the ship is just going in a straight line, kind of back at that angle I established. The motion blur looks pretty janky when you're frame by framing it, but when you play it fast, it sort of flies off like that, right?
Yeah. And as our we'll say person who keeps getting shouted out in this program, Todd Vaziri, has said many times, remember, lens flares have motion blur. It was a recent reminder. Hey, everyone, just remember, lens flares have motion blur.
Interestingly, on this one, it worked better. I'm using particular here from our friends over at trapcode/redgiant/maxon. And it worked out better to put that above the motion blur I was creating, but then I directionally blurred them. So I think that counts.
Ooh.
Yeah. We'll see how well it works to actually do it, but I ended up using 4 little lights because I could place them in the engines of this thing, and then you can actually see the lighting build up before it jumps to warp, and then
because then you're actually going to get real glows on your model. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah, because of course you can have 3D models in After Effects now, and they're even animated. You can see those double V wings closing up right before it jumps, which I assume is how this is supposed to work.
Yeah, and I think that's a what is that? That's a Constitution class.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Good. It's perfect. I know what the ships are.
Yeah. So we'll start off, yeah, just kind of quickly, pretty much how you had built your background. I have just a little star field here, and I just did that with our old friend CC Starburst, which, much as the name implies, it's pretty much the best way to create some stars. So, by default, it looks like this, and by default, it's animated already, so it's just kind of always going through that. Could work as like
No,
a
no.
blizzard too.
The best way to create some stars is to hold open auditions, and then you get someone from
Hmm.
where's that fellow from? I want to say Smiths Falls, Ontario, to be in your program. Actually, I don't know where Hayden Christensen is from. Someone I know went to high school with him.
Oh, I'm not sure who that is.
Ah, okay, well,
Yeah.
he plays a Borg.
Oh, okay. Cool.
If that helps.
It absolutely does, clearly.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I just took Starburst and set the speed to 0 and tinkered with it until it looked like stars, and then I tinted them just a wee bit here. And then I felt like we needed a little something to, make this. I feel like it had a little bit of sense of place to it, even though we're going to get. Here we go. We are going to get that little bit of camera shift on this here, but it felt like it needed a little bit more. So I just took turn this off real quick. I just took a shape layer and made kind of a little blurb across the screen, right? And then a little bit of turbulent displace, a little bit of blur, and then made a layer with 2 instances of fractal noise. Pro tip, a lot of times one looks good, but a second one looks even better. And the reason that works is because fractal noise, of course, has a blending mode built right into it, so you can stack them up and make that look however you want. And then just like Evan,
infinite combinations, infinite variety, and infinite combinations. That's what we say
exactly.
on this program.
Yeah, that's a thing now. And then just like Evan did, you can just turn that into a matte. Make sure it's a Luma matte in this case. That way you're using those white and black values, and so it just kind of knocks that out. And so you have a nice background here. And let's turn off some of those other fellows here. Perfect. And so then, just that gas belt kind of helps it feel a little more like it's moving. It's not just stars. So I just saw a question pop up here. Can you make a fractal noise go across the screen like a gradient? Absolutely. You can do whatever you want with fractal noise. I guess I'm not entirely sure. Like, can you make it move? You absolutely can. And you could also stack a gradient along with this. Okay, yeah. So a gradient ramp that's really rough. So absolutely. So just to do this here, let's go ahead and call up our old friend gradient ramp. And okay, so we've got a simple white and black ramp here. And then you could stack one of these fractal noise on top of that. And then in this case, I'm using multiply. So all the dark values for my fractal noise are just going over that ramp that already existed. So this is absolutely a way that you can break up a ramp and make it a little more organic.
Yeah, I think it's overlay is the one that's going to get it into the gray mid values.
Yep.
So you could still end up with totally white on one side, totally black on the other.
Totally.
Which is a big thing that I think we maybe abuse quite a lot when we want to do a kind of rough translation between two things, either as a wipe or anything that needs to be full on one side, kind of variable in the middle, and then full off on the other side. So, I mean, that helps.
Yeah, I think we've kind of talked before about using stuff like this for displacement maps, or there's an effect called gradient wipe. I can type here. And so you can use this white and black map to transition other layers on and off, and breaking it up like this with some noise is a really great way to make that feel more organic. So it's not just kind of a chunky wipe. So stacking up those fractal noise instances and really dialing that in, and just kind of play with these until you get the look you're after.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think maybe people don't don't put enough fractals noises over top of each other. They're pretty light. Like it's a pretty light thing to just, you know what? If you're going to use one, use two instead.
Use two, yeah. And you can absolutely animate these. I didn't really see any point in here because that would have looked unnatural for what I was using it for. But you could animate both of these. You could, have them evolving in different ways. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, there's always two, a master and an apprentice.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
That's how it works in the trades.
So
pretty wild. That's how plumbers do.
I ended up. Whoa. Well, there you go. Left that on. So I just used CC environment exactly like Evan did, and then I just put a little bit of blur. But let me turn off that noise because that's of course not supposed to be on back there. Just a teeny little blur, so those stars aren't too super sharp in the background. That's all. And then of course we need to have our planet here. And so for that, exactly the same thing, but we're using kind of the opposite effect. I certainly could have used an actual 3D object here, but I thought this would be easier to work with, and I didn't need like super dynamic movement. So CC Sphere, which has been around forever, but it's good old standby. You can feed it an equirectangular comp like this, which is twice as wide as it is tall. And the thing I like about this is now it's super easy to tweak this here in After Effects. And so I did. I just kind of broke up. This is, where's the site? This site, Solar Textures, has a ton of great stuff from the planets in our solar system, and as well as multiple things from Earth. And then they even made a few fictional ones from some of the planet-like objects that live in our solar system, like Haumea and Makemake and Eris that live out on the edge of our solar system. But we don't have good pictures of them because they're small and hard to get to. So this is sort of a fictionalized version of that. But then I slapped some of Earth clouds over it, so we had some atmosphere. And then a little bit of coloration, but then I wanted to break that up. So of course, there's another noise, fractal noise layer there that I used just to break up this color so I could just give some variety, kind of give the impression of different biomes on a planet, which is, I know, a very novel idea.
I know, two or more biomes on a planet. Yep. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And you see, it's not like a huge difference here, but it's just enough that, it does give it some character. So it's not just brown, right?
What was the name of that site? We'll put it in the chat here, I guess.
Yeah, it's solarsystemscope.com, and then I'm looking at /textures.
Hold on.
Solarsystemscope.com. Yeah, okay. We've got some other space nerdy things here, but
yeah.
So let's see. So then to make that planet, I just slapped old CC Sphere on that pre-comp. A little bit of curves here. And then, of course, this is a habitable place, so it needs an atmosphere. So you can just do another instance of that and then give it a blue, let's turn that off, like a light blue fill and a little bit of blur. And now you're starting to get some of your atmosphere here. Oh, there you go, that little sort of kiss of blue. Need a little bit of that over the front, too. There you go, great. So you just kind of layer this up until you're happy with the look. And this is kind of, sort of the hero of this shot, but not really. It will become so once the ship leaves, so it needs to look interesting enough that people care to look at it, right?
And yeah, like those details of the light coming through, making it blue. And of course, I mean, I'm sure if there's like a bunch of xenon or something in the atmosphere, it would be a different color. I don't know.
Sure. Choose whatever color you like.
Yeah.
Blue felt right. And it's one of our brand colors, so that's kind of what I went with.
Yeah. Oh, guys, let's go ahead and beam on down to that planet. Well, the atmosphere is like green. Maybe we don't go
might
down
be
there.
Weird.
Just put a mask on. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
So of course the real star of this is our ship here, which is a 3D model. Just to kind of show you here. Sure, we'll do that. And then here in our assets, we have this, they're calling it X-wing, like it used to have wings and now it doesn't, maybe?
Yeah, a formerly winged ship.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you can see here, I just pulled this from Sketchfab again, right here, and from Star Wars Universe. It's an interesting username. Yeah.
People have all kinds of funny things for their username.
They do. They do. And one of the things that I liked about this is that it is animated. And so if I go to the right place in the footage, this was placed sort of strangely. It's like really far into this. Here, I need to enable the thing. I am in the beta. I need to call that out. This animated models are still only in beta. And you twirl those open, and you can find this little thing called name, and then you can find the different takes here. And there we go. There's our animation. And so I found those, and I just kind of dialed in the spots because I just needed them to kind of close back up for me, right, like that. And like I said, I ended up matching some lights into this. And so what I needed to do was kind of track something into these so that I could get the placement for my particle generators, which I was driving with lights, which is the thing that you can do with particular. Felt like it would be a nice, two birds, one stone, that you're floating in the air somehow kind of strategy, right? So I actually, where was it? So I made a composition specifically looking right at the rear end of this ship so that I could manually keyframe the position of these lights to match that, because I'm, of course, time remapping this a little bit, and so to get those to all match up, so these little like white balls here was me just making like a quick little 3D object that I could track into here, and then I had my position data that I could copy paste to the lights that are in the actual thing. And as long as these are parented to my ship, which they are, and the other things are parented to my ship, which they are, that position data will be the same. And, yeah. And so then you have your ship here. Flies off very quickly at the beginning. So let's do our ship direction, which is, of course, a null. And so we can see our null and see how it's angled just the way Evan did here. And then I did a couple things because I needed kind of, just like you, I needed to make sure the scale felt just right, So you kind of have a couple things going on at once here. Where the ship itself is flying off. And I ended up doing it with a, here we go. Maybe not on this one. I made a couple of copies of my composition here. Let's close some of these other ones down. There we go. This is the correct. And I was like, I'm missing some stuff here. Let me turn off some of these so that I get performance. Go into draft 3D mode. So what I did is my ship is on that null, and then the ship is moving away on just Y here. I split up the position since I could, and then it's also scaling, and then it's also I'm sort of multiplying that scaling by using another 100 to 0 here on this little slider control on my null, and so my scale from whatever value to 0 is also sort of being compounded by this 100 to 0. So I'm getting a really nice, snappy, fast scale. And while I certainly did ease these as well, like that kind of gave me the ability to really make it more exponential instead of just fighting with one set of keyframes. And so I'm scaling and doing the actual position move. So it gave it the ability to just, fly off really fast so it could kind of take off like that. So I don't know. Maybe you would do it differently, but that's part of the point of talking through this, right?
Yeah, I always tend to actually stretch the ship out, right? I'm always like, all right, the nose will go there, and then the back will snap up to it. That really feels like a Hitchhiker's Guide type.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you really have to look for the reference for the way that each particular franchise does their jump into light speed or warp speed or whatever else you might
Yeah.
call it. Because like Star Trek ships definitely do kind of stretch, I believe, and they leave a trail. Other franchises don't tend to leave a trail, but like I thought it made sense here so we could really see our brand colors a little bit.
Yeah, it's because they have to project a warp bubble in front of them using the deflector dish, which just makes sense.
Exactly, right.
It's not like there's a dimension that you can go into with somehow roads that connect the universe, squishing and squashing it.
That sounds pretty more like fantasy than
it's more of a fantastical idea. Whereas if the universe is connected through mushrooms and you can somehow hook into that network, a much more plausible scientific basis for fast and light traffic.
Yeah.
I personally, my favorite FTL drive is the infinite improbability drive from Hitchhiker's Guide. And if you've seen the movie version of that, they do such an interesting job of when it goes, the ship goes through different permutations of what the ship would be like in different dimensions. Mm-hmm. And then when they snap back, they would always do, it's like they were coming back one permutation too early. And I remember there was one where they turned into yarn and then is barfing yarn out, and the human now has yarn coming out of their face. It's great. It's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination.
I do need to rewatch that though.
Sam Rockwell is hilarious in it. It's great. Yeah, bring a towel. Don't panic. These are the important things to remember when going through space. Mm-hmm. All right, let's see.
I assumed your 420 in your title crawl was a reference to that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then just 0 to kind of pad it out some.
Yeah, I need to make space in the thing. It's the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
0.
Yeah, and then 0.
So I won't go super deep into particular because that can get a little complicated, but I wanted to show the setup here. Mm-hmm. So as you saw, I have 4, these are just point lights here, and those got that copy pasted position data from that other little comp that you saw just a minute ago. Mm-hmm. And then I just linked their intensity and color all to this one so I could just control it in one spot. I did a few experiments with the fall off here, and what I ended up needing to do, sort of interestingly, when this was all coming together, I really liked the way that these give that sort of bloom on the back of the ship as the engines are powering up, right? But it ended up having an interesting effect on the planet. I'm not sure if... So like these, even if I kept them pretty low, they were still lighting the planet. And as soon as the ship disappeared, then the planet went black because the light was too far away. And I couldn't seem to find a way to offset that. So I ended up, my actual post version has the background stuff pre-comped so that I could just separate that variable. So that's also just like a little lesson. Sometimes, when you get to the end and you're trying to fine tune something, like that can be a perfectly fine time to pre-comp the thing and just not fight with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that are like, well, the physical reality of space, it would be like this, but we're painting for attention with light.
Yeah.
So it's not real. Why is there fire in space? It's a vacuum.
Why is there noise in space?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Shout out to The Expanse. Shout out to Firefly.
I think I would say that the newer Battlestar Galactica handled it pretty well too.
Yeah.
Where it's like they still gave us some, but it's very muffled.
Yeah, they kind of were the first ones to go like handheld in space, right?
Yeah. I feel like The Expanse probably owes a lot to the newer BSG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that there's some really interesting. Just the idea that, whoa, what's over there? Now I got to zoom in on it. I better crash zoom on that. It really surprised me when that ship showed up. Is this a documentary about people in space? What's happening?
Kinda.
Yeah, I applaud anyone who makes big swings like that. Also, like your inclusion of, oh yeah, the camera's getting bumped by the force of this thing going to warp.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, we're in a vacuum. What do you mean? But yeah,
Well, there's still like shockwaves and stuff.
yeah, exactly. Some kind of pulse or
If we can hear muted sounds, we can also have force waves travel through space, maybe slightly less so than they would in an atmosphere.
okay, that makes sense.
That's logically consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some particles in space.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a second. Speaking of particles, I am going to take a second here and dive into. So particular is a particle generator, and while I love staying native for these streams, usually I thought this was a time I wasn't going to fight with one of the native particle generators to get this because I needed the 3D awareness that particular has,
Right.
and specifically what particular can do is look at lights as emitters. So I could double up here. I could get the lovely little illumination from actually sticking lights in the ends of these engines, and also be generating particles off of them. And in the case of particular, I can generate two systems of particles from them. There's a pink trail and a yellow trail. And this is probably going to take a second to update each time. But so there's pink particles, and then there's yellow particles that are also happening. And you can kind of see the yellow gives sort of like an inner core of that. And this was more just me wanting to show our pink and yellow branding colors, but felt like it looked nice and gave them a little bit of, cool trail, right? So honestly, a lot of this, let me turn off. There's a few other effects after particular, but these are literally just like a little bundle of dots here, as you'll see when this takes off. So again, like you can use a particle generator like this to get mostly what you need, but instead of fighting with it forever to get it perfect, like you can do that and then slap some directional blur on it, for example, and then tritone it after the fact instead of trying to get all your exact perfect particles, in there. Maybe that's what you need, maybe it's not. And of course, anytime you're using tritone, you can use a little bit of levels or curves to dial in those black and white values before they're getting colored, so you can really give it the nice little kiss of exactly what you want. So I don't know. Anything else that you feel like I need to poke around on here? Does that explain things pretty well? Anyone in the chat have questions?
Apparently a star is going to go supernova, the blaze star. So,
well, that would be cool. I mean, eventually our own sun will go supernova, but we'll all be very dead by then. Fortunately.
Yeah, the eventual heat death of the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got one more thing to show, so maybe we'll get into that. If we're going into warp.
Let's warp over to Evan's screen here.
Yeah, teleport yourself on in. And so if you've got the outside shot, this is what it kind of would look like from inside of the bridge, I guess, of such a thing. So
maybe the cockpit of a little cross-wing ship, for example.
Yeah, or you get onto I want to say a shuttle pod or
something like that.
Delta flyer of some kind. These are things people know about, not these weird obscure things. So this is the idea that we are going to be looking at a star field. It's going to stretch and then blast. This is literally one of the first things I ever did in After Effects way back in the day. And if you had, let's say you had like a cockpit of some kind around this. This could be like just a picture of the inside of a toy or something. This could just be a silhouette of some form.
That's a cool shape.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think it's called a pizza. It's a pizza style
like
cockpit.
That. Yeah.
Where it's just a bunch of wedges, or the Trivial Pursuit style cockpit. Anyway, but the point is, you gotta have like radial stuff. Now, whether this is happening in front of or behind or whatever's going on, that's what we're going for. So there are nigh on infinite ways, again, infinite variations and infinite combinations this is was it infinite diversity and infinite combinations. It's one of those.
Sure.
We'll figure it out. This, for me, starts with a fractal noise and very, very tiny little pinpricks of light out there in the world.
Now, can I ask why you wanted fractal noise instead of starburst? Like,
all right, so instead of the stars burst, the delicious candy of starburst. So starburst has a few things going for it, right? If you need stars and you want to treat it like particles, this is really, starburst is the way to go. So it's got an amount of scatter. Let's bring the size of the individual lumps up, right? It can have a speed, so it can be drifting at us. But where this kind of falls down is if you then start to deploy some blurs, some fast blurs to it, it can get a little wackadoo with sort of the way it picks stuff up. The other thing that it falls down on is we can't adjust the center of this. So imagine, if you will, in this shot, we're just imagining that what we want to do is kind of like find our vector. You know, we're going to punch in the coordinates, 28-7 Mark 10. And then we're going to say warp 9 engage, and then we're going to turn into lizards. Doesn't matter why that happens, but you can't really do that because the CC starburst has no way of changing its center or its axis or where it's coming from or going to. Fractal noise, we can. So fractal noise has that ability to move it around. You can rotate it. You can do all kinds of stuff with it.
It's almost like fractal noise is just the best effect in After Effects.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully someone has done a power ranking of all effects and that this one comes
If
out.
only.
Oh, man. And here's a question that's a little bit outside of our expertise. I know very English. How can I learn it? Can you help me? I'd be glib and say we should be using universal translators, which obviously translate the intent of an alien species type of thing. Is it built into the communicator? Because people seem to be able to use it without the communicator. I'm going to assume they drill it into people's heads in Starfleet Academy. Like, it's... Or you put a fish in your ear and then it does the stuff for you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The good kind of brainworm.
But in terms of good ways to learn English, number one, you got to be using it conversationally, as with learning any language. And the other thing is start small and build up to it. But just make mistakes. Most people aren't jerks. I hope. I don't know. I have a lot of strong opinions about language learning because there are some places that are real snobs and they're like, actually, you pronounced it slightly wrong. Like, yeah, and you knew what they were saying because that's how malleable this language is. So quit being a ding-dong about it. Could you imagine Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra getting on like this? So let's look at the fractal noise here.
Sounds like a bunch of poodoo, Evan.
That's right, poodoo. So I'm going to just reset my contrast and brightness values here to kind of show something. So if we take our contrast up a bit and we take our brightness down and we make our little star field, nice stars, nice planet here, and then we fast blur those, you can kind of see that the fast blur turns it into not much of anything, right? It really kind of gets blurred out. And if we use some of the other blurs, if we were to use, say, CC radial blur regular instead of CC radial fast blur, it literally turns into nothing, right? But within the fractal noise, we can actually have values that far exceed the visual spectrum. It just becomes data. Yeah, exactly. Well, Kyle, where we're going, we don't need eyes. So
perfect.
So you can see that I can keep cranking the contrast up and I can keep bringing the brightness down. And so you can get bright star fields that still show up because these are HDR results. Like they're high dynamic range. They're beyond the values. And so that's why with these radial fast blurs, you can really blow it out. So that's just something to kind of be cognizant of, and one of the fun little bits that you can do when you are using fractal noise over, say, the starburst, because these HDR results make some really cool trails out of the smallest, the teensiest pinpricks out there in the world, which is exactly what we want. So we want it to really blast out like this. So how are we doing that? Well, I'm just using the radial fast blur. That's all. No biggie. It's an easy bit of business. It's pretty light, so I've stacked two of them on top of each other. And that's because one of them gets you that far, and then a second one gets you that far. And if you wanted a third one, you could go even more. And this has the ability to say, give me the brightest pixels. So a standard isn't going to get you there, but the brightest one is going to pick out just those super bright things that we've done and stretch those forward. Now, from there, we might deploy, say, a levels to crunchitize this stuff. And over time, the histogram is kind of tough to read over time.
Yeah.
But that is being keyframed as this is happening. So we're keyframing it into the more extreme band where we know this is going to land like that. Now, black and white values are not particularly super interesting all the time. So hold on, I'm just going to, let's roll it back. There we go. So,
okay.
And we're back to where we started, just so I can dial it in correct. Yeah, just plain black and white values might not be super interesting. So let's put a little color around them. Colorama, the second best effect is Colorama. Best effect, fractal noise. Second
with
best,
the absolute best UI.
Yeah. Well,
Clearly.
a much improved UI. It's had a real special enhanced edition here.
Part of the UI is improved.
Some of the UI is kind of improved. So I am taking as an input the intensity. Now that would mean that we are looking at how black or white values are. And we're just going to remap those to an output cycle of blue to we say
other blue,
a more different.
You know what?
Blue.
That's a nice milky blue.
Yeah, exactly. A milky blue from a kind of powerful iridescent blue. But here's the big thing: if you were to say change everything down here in the modify zone, well, the black goes to one color and the light goes to the other color. So instead, I'm saying, let's only change the hue and the saturation of the pixels. Leave the lightness be. And only a certain type of person deals in absolutes. So that's why we are changing it to HS, which I think stands for high school, I guess. No, it stands for hue and saturation. And that is going to give you these changes here in the midtones, right? Because the white parts are going to totally blow it out. The black parts are going to stay that way. And then we get this gradation in the midtones. If you wanted some other colors, I don't know, like a cool pink, we could smash a pink into the middle there. We could
I do want that.
Yeah, we could put like a yellow here on the other side. And you can get some really cool like trails in here. A kind of like chromatic aberration feel to it, which I think is pretty nice. Some very good science fiction series make liberal use of this.
Well, look, if you are exceeding the speed of light, it makes sense that your visual spectrum would sort of be stretched and distorted a bit. So
yeah, and the other thing, I remember seeing how these effects were made in the olden times with just like two pieces of cardboard being slowly shifted over each other. It's so cool and interesting to see how those effects are possible just with two pieces of cardboard. That blows my mind because I am a dork, and that's why I do this stuff. But hey, this is we got coming into the greens here. What else did I want to change about this? Right, we've got the blend with original that just tamps the effect down a little bit, and that's pretty much it. That's basically all that we're doing with this type of thing. And then we're racking the the evolution of the fractal
Mhm.
noise to give this kind of oh, space is going nuts kind of deal. So you get slow growth like that. Wow!
Why do I feel the need to keep physically reacting to that?
I know that's the vibe. Here's
Yep.
the other thing I'll say that is useful to do with this. Our radial fast blurs here, one thing that I have kind of shifted about them is where their center is. So if you line this up exactly middle center, you get this kind of cross feeling out here that anything that's going to be close to those, say, cardinal directions starts to feel a lot stronger. If
Mhm.
you just take this a little bit off the midline, you get rid of that
Nice.
tendency and it feels a lot more natural. Especially because if you're on the bridge of, I want to say like a noble and excellent starship for exploration, then you're up here on the ship and it's moving forward. So the actual center of the thing is actually lower than you. So it makes sense that you would be kind of looking down into the heart of the storm sort of vibe, right? And
Well,
that,
what if the bridge of your ship were offset way to the right?
well, that's kind of the
Yes.
dumbest way to organize a ship, but you
It does
could
seem yeah, it seems like it'd be a very strange perspective.
yeah, it's like how my car doesn't have a second car beside it. It puts most of the luggage behind it, so that
Yeah.
you kind of know where it is.
But does it really matter in space? I mean, it seems like it would create a huge blind spot.
Sure, but it really depends if that ship will ever break atmo and land on a planet. If so, it becomes absolutely insane to structure things non-aerodynamically.
What if it does that all the time?
Yeah, well, then I'm sure the shear forces on a ship need it to be built more like a soup can than a submarine. So it's a whole lot of stuff. Star Trek Enterprise, watch it. Okay, so I've only seen some episodes of that. It's like Hunt for Red October, but in space. So what else did I want to say about this? This is just one way of doing it, right? And it relies pretty heavily on assuming that the vantage point is like just flat on going into the void. There are some other ways that we could accomplish a very similar vibe, right? Let's try the cylindrical approach, we would say, right? Let's make a equirectangular type of deal. Cylinder wrap. Oh wait, that's way too long. That's not equirectangular at all. What are you saying, Evan? You nut.
That's like octarectangular.
Yeah. But the same thing, right? We could start with a solid and we could fill it full of fractal noise, right? We fill it full of the noise, and then we are going to go ahead and we're going to stretch the thing out. So I guess that would be a directional blur, which we're going to learn some weird stuff about directional blur here in a minute. So we're going to do this and we're going to blur it out. Notice how the edges get kind of nasty. That's just a thing directional blur does.
Yeah.
Did you know that we have a Gauss in the house blur?
I did know this.
And we can make it blurry. And we can say only do it horizontally. And look at this. We can repeat
Edge pixels.
Repeat them. Repeat those edge pixels. So let's go ahead and crank up the contrast. Let's crank down the brightness. Let's remember that we can keep pushing these in opposite directions until we get something like this. The evolution can be going a little bit wackadoo like that. And let's just go ahead and like this. And we want to be like in the tunnel, right? So if you are, there we are. Now we're feeling the speed.
Yes.
So if we bring our cylindrical wrap into here and we use the old CC cylinder in this, I hope I had it going the right way. I didn't because I'm a ding dong. Now it's going around the cylinder.
I'll tell you what though, these off-week shows, there's a lot more room to be a ding dong because we don't have to end at a specific time.
That's true. I can do it wrong so many times. There we go. We're going to look down the barrel of this thing.
Perfect.
Like that. I think this is getting a lot more 2001 Space Odyssey type vibes.
Yep.
But how do we get in there, right? We want to get into that zone. Well, this is a actual 3D thing that we can interact with if we have a camera.
It's an actual 3D thing, asterisk.
It's a window into a 3D world, and we can look through a camera at it, which we will do now. And I probably want like a 15 millimeter or something like that.
Nice and wide. There we go.
Now we are in the tunnel. We're in there. Yeah. What was the thing I needed to do? Oh, yeah, I need to rotate this. Maybe I just make the composition the other way.
Yeah, I mean, you could use transform, or you could,
yeah. Let's
it in here.
Let's just transform it. So transform before cylinder, and let's see. We're just
Evan, while you're figuring that out, our regular friend Devlin is talking about something that rhymes with a delennial schmalkin, and I'm really drawing a blank on what that could be.
It's a commemorative coin.
Okay.
Yeah, to commemorate the millennium. It's got a bird on it.
Okay. Gotcha.
I hope that clears things up. I hope this clears things up for
Is it sort of a like disc shaped thing?
Yeah.
I think I have a Lego version of that coin back behind me.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Probably not visible in my circle box.
Yeah, it's too far back there.
Yeah.
There we go. So now we are really going through the tunnel here.
Yes.
And wonderfully, like you could look at like if there's two ships in the tunnel together. Right? And we could kind of pan between them and stuff like that. It's tubular. So the same problem applies, that we want to be using your various coloramas, or you might want to be using, oh, well, that's kind of a weird. Yeah, this is definitely getting very 2001.
Yeah.
You can use levels or curves. I tend to, with a lot of utility type stuff, use levels first.
Same, because you can see it.
You can get this sick graph, man.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is feeling very video art. This is nice. So just come into the cycle here. We'll just trim off some of these. There we go. Nice and normal stuff going on in here.
Perfect.
Maybe like this. And we are going to go ahead and make sure that we are applying those. As we said, we are modifying only the HS. That's looking crazy. There we are. Now,
yes.
Now we're getting places. There we go. Maybe we
it's been a big day for sound effects.
Yeah. Well, we're good at them, so might as well.
Objectively.
We are objectively great at sound effects. So now we can come in here and we say, well, we've got most of the thing figured out. If we come into the transform, we can start to tighten up these strands. And we're getting stuff like that. So the way we end up tightening and loosening and doing stuff in here is going to start to alter the way this kind of looks. So if I just duplicate this and I say, well, let's go ahead and take that Gauss in the house blur off of there. We've still got a wackadoo fractal noise having a good time. We might scale this up a bit. We might change this to something like a multiply. So it's kind of blocking stuff out. And we will just bring this here. Contrast can come down, so it's a bit cloudy. There we are. Now it's taking a bite out of stuff like this. It's back in the cylinder.
There you go.
Yeah. So the CC cylinder does have the unfortunate problem of having a seam down at the bottom, which is because the right and the left parts of this don't marry up with each other. Always make that sound whenever you're thinking about marriage. So let's go ahead and use the offset in here. This is a fun bit of business that you can expose the seam, which is useful because now we can see the seam.
Yeah, do stuff with it.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit easier for us to even just take this over the center, add, subtract, and there we go. Where did the seam go? Well, we bumped it out to the sides. Tee-hee-hee. And then we'll just blur it. Hey, where's that seam gone? I don't know, and you don't know either. That's that's how it works.
Kind of looks like the old Doctor Who intro.
Oh yeah,
maybe the new Doctor Who intro. I don't really watch that show.
It's like the much better program Sliders.
Yes, yes.
Shout out to Jerry O'Connell. Triumphant return to science fiction with Lower Decks.
And you know what? Now he's hosting a game show. Right. So good for him. That's probably a blast.
Life is good for Jerry O'Connell. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So there.
If you're when you decide that we're coming in for a landing, you should definitely full screen that so that we can all like warp into it.
True. Okay, there is something that I must do with this.
Please.
Notice that we run out of room. So I used time times 3,000. Right? That's a huge bit of business, right? And eventually that number runs out. So what you might
because most things in After Effects top out at 30,000.
Yeah, it's a big number. So you think, well, you'll never get there. But at the same time, yeah, you kind of do. So at a certain point, you might. So you could do in your evolution settings, your evolution options, you could just cycle them. So it'll at least hit a cycle point. But this is where, I don't know if we talked about this, this is where that modulus is pretty helpful. So you could say time times this, and then you could just like modulo 300, and you're gonna wrap it around instead of running out of road. Just something to think about, but especially in this case when you might need this for a very long time. But just know that now we're fighting the cycle evolutions and stuff. You are gonna feel the hit when you hit the turnaround. Anywho's. If it's chaotic enough, if it's really cranking, you probably won't notice the. Oh boy, you might notice it because I put that cycle. Down here, right? So now it's feeling nice and chaotic. So we'll come back into the cylinder, and we'll just go ahead and really observe.
Yes.
Actually, that's probably very bad for anyone who has an epileptic thing. Let's put an adjustment layer over top of that and just posterize the time down. Now it's going to feel a lot more old school.
And take longer to render, probably.
Oh well, it'll take an eighth of the time to render.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, because we're just asking for fewer frames, and it can get ahead of us. Oh, beautiful. Anyway,
I'm
Kyle,
pleased with this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this kind of brings us into the end of the program. I guess we were hosted on the Adobe Live page. I guess there wasn't a lot of things going on there today.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is great. Let's go back to the two shot of us. Kyle, thanks for beaming in and being with me here today.
Of course. I mean, if we're going to be talking about a popular sci-fi franchise, I thought I needed to dress the part.
Exactly. Yep. And that is the correct way to dress for today's episode. And we nailed it. Yep. We know things in popular culture. We're back next week. We're going to be here next week. What are we doing next week?
Not wearing costumes.
Well, some would say that every time we put on clothes, we're putting on a costume. Some
would say that. Honestly, off the top of my head, I forgot what next week's show is.
Okay,
Let me check real quick.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and look it up here.
All right. Because we've changed them a few times. Oh, yes. Rather ironically, we're going to be responsive.
That's exactly what we're going to be doing. So it's responsive design next week. Things that scale and change and rearrange based on how large the composition is. So that is the plan for the day. If you make templates, if you're doing social media stuff, if you're tired of remaking compositions for every permutation that you need to output, see you next week. That's the idea. I mean, we keep saying it, infinite combinations in diverse multiplications, etc. But that's the idea, that we're going to be letting After Effects do more of the maths and the rearrangement of stuff. And I hope we see you there. I hope that's going to be a good time. Anything else we should tell people?
Well, as we said at the beginning, if you have questions for us, if you want us to demonstrate something on this show, please just ask. That's literally the point of this. We always love little questions as they come up, but if you have a bigger one, that gives us some time to prep good examples and stuff. So send that in using the form down below, or go to motiondesignhotline.com, which is in fact a real website for real people. There's no spirits or ghosts that are part of any sort of universal energy field or anything like that.
Just the ones that come out. Just ones that live in a candle. Those are the spirits I'm interested in. All right. Well, you can follow me on the internet at EC Abrams. You can follow him at Kylosaurus Rex. And live long and prosper. Yeah. What if we ended all of our shows doing that? Could you imagine?